The battle against the demon lord destroyed Lloyd's entire village as collateral damage. You can tell by the look in his eyes that he has clearly seen some crazy, trauma-inducing stuff. And when Merlin finds him standing there, she feels guilty because it was her carelessness that led to this destruction. To atone for her mistake, she decides to take Lloyd in and give him a new home with her. And while he's living with her, she also decides to train him in the ways of magic. The first spell she attempts to teach Lloyd is the flame spell, and her teaching method primarily consists of demonstrating the spell to him for about 3 seconds before telling him, "You won't get dinner today if you can't replicate the spell on your own." Against all odds, by evening time, Lloyd finally manages to create a small flame in his hand, but when he shows it to Merlin, instead of being supportive, she calls his fire poomy and singes his eyebrows with a wall of flame for not doing it well enough. But she does let him have dinner since he learned the spell. The next day, Merlin tells Lloyd he'll learn water magic. She gives him a small demonstration and swipes her foot across the ground, creating a small spout of water. She then asks Lloyd to do the same, but after trying it, all he was able to do was wet the ground, and he seemed pretty proud of himself. But Merlin isn't impressed, so she pours a ton of water on Lloyd to show him what real water magic looks like. As time goes on, Lloyd's training continues, with him doing his best to learn spells and Merlin punishing him for not doing it well enough. However, her training has been effective, as Lloyd's magical skills have improved enough to create a Merlin snow sculpture with a wave of his finger by winter. It was a thoughtful gesture and Merlin does appreciate it, but she doesn't want to break character, so she takes control of the sculpture and grabs Lloyd with it while making it 30 feet tall to show him what real snow manipulation looks like. The snow then crumbles and Lloyd falls to the ground, but the two of them have a good understanding of each other by this point. So as soon as he digs himself out of the snow, he tells Merlin he will work harder on his magic, and she smiles in acknowledgement. More time goes by, and one morning Merlin is lying on her couch with a massive hangover because she drank too much last night. Lloyd goes to check on her and asks if she's alright, but Merlin tells him she feels absolutely terrible. Lloyd wants to help, so he places his hand on Merlin's forehead and uses his white magic to assist her in recovering from her hangover. After a few seconds, she suddenly feels much better. She sits upright and hugs Lloyd while thanking him for healing her. But now that she's back on her feet, she says it's time for them to get back to his magic training, so she drags Lloyd outside again. Things go on like this for years, but one day Merlin receives a book in the mail that has her very concerned. Just then, Lloyd knocks on her door to tell her that dinner is ready, so she tells him she's coming and starts putting the book away. However, while she is doing this, she accidentally drops the book in front of Lloyd, prompting him to bend down to pick it up. As soon as his hands touch the book, a flood of information fills his mind. Lloyd passes out from the sudden data dump, and when Merlin realizes what happened, she's astonished because Lloyd has the qualities of the Chosen One. She takes Lloyd to bed for now, but if he really is the Chosen One, then she can't let him make the same mistakes she did. She kisses his forehead, and there's a faint glow left behind as she places a spell on him because she can't let Lloyd become overconfident in his power like she was. The next day, Lloyd's training continues, and this time Merlin takes him out into the forest so he can practice his white magic. Lloyd uses it on a single fruit to make it grow ripe and juicy, and Merlin praises him for doing a fantastic job. She also wants to show him that he has a long way to go, so she puts her hand on the tree and uses white magic to make it green everywhere. Later that night, Merlin is helping Lloyd study and explains to him that there are some orcs who can use rare magic to control monsters. While reading, Lloyd notices something called ancient magic, but as soon as he mentions it, Merlin's mood shifts and she tells him he doesn't need to learn it. Some of Merlin's other lessons include learning how to summon your magic staff as quickly as possible. But since Lloyd didn't do it fast enough, she knocks him over with her own staff. She then tells Lloyd that he must never neglect his training, no matter how powerful he may become, and Lloyd promises to always remain diligent. The next lesson involves learning about magic stones, so Merlin explains that they are crystallized forms of magic, and their power can turn surrounding objects into magical stones as well. A few years go by, and one day, during one of Merlin's lessons, she takes Lloyd out into the middle of nowhere, gives him a knife, and tells him he has to survive this forest and make it home on his own. She then skedaddles before Lloyd can make any objections. Now that Merlin has left, a white wolf appears in the distance and assaults Lloyd. Lloyd flees for his life and ultimately climbs a tree to seek refuge from the wolf. He doesn't think magic from a white mage like him would be enough to defeat a monster like that, so his only option is to run home while avoiding any and all monster encounters. But with that said, when he uses magic to scan the area so he can figure out which direction to go, he discovers that he's really far from home. He has no choice but to start slowly making his way through the forest, and when night falls, he spends his time studying his spells to make as many improvements as possible. Several days go by like this, and at one point Lloyd accidentally steps on a twig that alerts a giant spider to his presence. Lloyd starts panicking and immediately runs in the opposite direction while using a haste spell to boost his speed enough to outrun the spider. He eventually makes it home safely, but collapses from exhaustion just outside the door. When Merlin sees him, she is incredibly proud of him for making it back on his own. A few more years go by, and one day while Lloyd is busy cleaning, he notices a book on Merlin's desk about a town. So he asks her if he can borrow the book out of curiosity, and she tells him he can have it. By this point, Lloyd has pretty much completed his training, so he doesn't have to deal with Merlin's constant lessons anymore. He appreciates that she now treats him as an equal and takes him every other day to help her develop new magic, as Lloyd is a spell developer. But he hasn't gotten any sleep in the past week because Merlin keeps making him stay up all night for the sake of magic research. He's starting to get sick of all the constant pressure, and he is so really curious about what town life is like. So he eventually makes a drastic decision. The next morning, Merlin heads up to Lloyd's room to ask for his help on some more magic research, but to her surprise, he is nowhere to be found, and judging by the book on his desk, she has a good idea of where he went. Meanwhile, Lloyd has just arrived in the town, and as he is walking through the streets, he's amazed by how busy everyone is since this is the first time he has ever been in a town. Once he buys a piece of bread, he runs out of money entirely, so he realizes he needs to find a job soon. As fate would have it, he encounters an adventurer recruitment poster directly. So Lloyd decides to sign up for the position. All the while, a mysterious man has been following Lloyd, and he seems rather intrigued by Lloyd's choice. After Lloyd signs up to join the adventurers' party, he heads to the top of the castle with his new party to fight a giant cyclops. The leader of the party, Alan, asks the healer Sheena to heal him. But right when Sheena is about to do so, Lloyd casts his refined step buff magic so everyone feels better than ever. However, none of them realize that Lloyd was the one behind it since he didn't say anything after the buff. The archer shoots the cyclops in the eye, and the knight blocks one of the cyclops' punches, leaving her honestly shocked by how easy it was. However, Alan doesn't question his sudden boost in strength and proceeds to defeat the Cyclops with a single blow, completely convinced that he achieved this on his own. Meanwhile, the knight appears to have noticed that Lloyd played a role in their unexpected increase in power. Anyway, now that the Cyclops have been taken care of, the party rides back into town, and Alan is being hailed as a hero because the Cyclops are apparently so hard to beat that no one else in town is able to do it. As expected, the reward for defeating the Cyclops was huge, but Alan only gives Lloyd 5 coins and says the low pay is because he's only a new D-rank adventurer. Lloyd accepts the money and doesn't complain. But when Alan suggests a toast to the party's victory, Lloyd excuses himself because he doesn't want to be involved. The party's mage gets offended that Lloyd doesn't want to drink with them, but Alan tells her it's fine since they can always hire another white mage, and it's not like he contributed much to the party's performance anyway. Meanwhile, back at Merlin's house, the man who had been watching Lloyd earlier arrives, and Merlin asks the man if he has any updates on Lloyd. Will tells her that Lloyd arrived in the town and has just joined the hero party, and Merlin is relieved to hear that Lloyd is safe. She figured it was about time for him to venture out on his own and experience the world, and as long as he doesn't become arrogant like she did when she was younger, she thinks he will be okay. We'll ask her if she still has regrets about what happened that day. And Merlin's lips curl in self-hatred as she remembers her mistake. Back then, the Demon Lord was willing to self-destruct to seize the magic book, something that Merlin failed to anticipate. As a result, an entire village was nuked, killing everyone nearby in an instant, including Merlin. Fortunately, her party member Sybil was able to use powerful ancient magic to revive everyone who died in the Demon Lord's explosion, but it cost him his life, and Merlin has been blaming herself for it ever since. Back to Lloyd's adventures, he's still part of the hero party. Every time Alan or the others are struggling in combat, he always casts buffs on them to make their battles easier. Thanks to him, they have a near-perfect victory record and everyone is always performing at top capacity. But none of them realize how much Lloyd is carrying the team. Later that night, Rihanna is reading up on defense when Alan stumbles into her room to see what she's up to. She tells him she's just curious about something, since the impact of monster attacks on her shield hasn't been as severe lately, and she doesn't understand why. Alan admits that he's been feeling a lot stronger lately too, but he assumes it's just his natural talent at work. However, Rena reminds him that he hasn't been training much recently, so there's no reason for him to have suddenly gotten stronger. That night, a guard screams in pain while patrolling the forest. The other looks up and sees this giant golem standing over him, and in that moment he realizes that he's really going to die because of a minimum wage job. The next morning, the guard captain meets with Alan to ask for his help. He reveals that the guards on night patrol yesterday met a brutal end. Alan immediately accepts the request since he thinks it should be simple enough to defeat Gollum. Later that day, they head to the site of the attack, and thanks to Lloyd's tracking magic, they are able to locate the Golem in a cave behind the waterfall. Since Lloyd is still supporting everyone, they are able to easily defeat the Golem, but there's a demon nearby who creates another one from the rocks on the ceiling. Lloyd takes a closer look at the demon and realizes it is using a staff with a magic stone to control the Golem, and magic stones are very dangerous, so he needs to take charge and act quickly before anything goes wrong. He casts an accuracy buff spell and orders Lulu to fire an arrow at the demon. Lulu is a bit surprised by Lloyd's sudden order, especially since the demon is hiding behind a wall. But she does it anyway, and her arrow somehow manages to connect. Lloyd then orders Mia to teleport the staff over to him, and as soon as she does so, Lloyd casts a spell to seal its power. Alan is getting pissed by the fact that Lloyd is ordering the others around when he's supposed to be the leader, so he tries to assert his dominance by charging in to deliver the final blow on the Golem. Lloyd doesn't want to let him die, so he casts a speed boost spell on himself and runs forward to push Alan out of the way before the Golem could squish his head. However, Alan doesn't even acknowledge the fact that Lloyd just saved his life and yells at him for getting in his way. Alan then proceeds to finish the Golem off, and when everyone gets back to town, he fires Lloyd for getting on his nerves. He also accuses him of slacking off and never doing anything to help the team. And because of all the years of Merlin telling him his skills weren't good enough, Lloyd naturally believes he must be the problem here. He agrees to leave the party without much of a fuss. And over the next few days, he tries to find a new party to join, but it's really difficult since most parties are already full and white mages aren't in high demand. However, as luck would have it, a girl named Yui happens to really need a white mage, so as soon as she finds Lloyd, she grabs his hand and begs him to join her party. I appreciate you viewing my anime recap, Unruly Family. Please let me know what you think about this anime recap by liking, sharing, and commenting, and please subscribe to the channel to help us reach 5,000 subscribers.